Hey guys, Chris Dick here. Today I'm going to guide you through the process of setting up Ubuntu Desktop 20.04 in a virtual machine. We're going to use VMware Workstation to do this. And in order to get this started, one of the things that we have to understand about Ubuntu is some of these recommended system requirements. It's saying that we have to have a 2 gigahertz dual core processor, 4 gigabytes of system memory, and 25 gigabytes of free hard drive space. It's also suggesting that an internet connection is helpful. So we're going to have all of these things. We're not going to worry about the DVD drive though. So when we set all of this up in VMware Workstation, you're going to see the areas where we make these changes. So let's get started. First, what you're going to do is click on the download and go ahead and download the ISO file. Make sure that you place it someplace that is easily accessible that you'll remember. So maybe it's on your desktop or your documents or downloads folder, but go ahead and do that right now. In the meantime, I'm going to skip a little further ahead here because I've already downloaded it. I'm going to go into our VMware Workstation now. Now, if you haven't got VMware Workstation, you'll want to watch my other section on setting up VMware Workstation. Otherwise, let's get started here. So today we're going to create a new virtual machine. Now, in the process of connecting to a virtual machine, or excuse me, setting up a virtual machine, um, we are just going to work with typical settings. We're not going to get too advanced with how we set up our virtual machine today. If you think about what we're trying to do here, we're really just setting up a test environment. So we're going to be disabling some things that aren't important to us, but most importantly, this will get you up to a point where you've got a true virtual machine. So let's get started. Click on next here. Now, the installer disk image, make sure that you have that disk image available. Just click browse and you'll find it. So for me, that's right over here. Let's click on that one. I've got a few different versions because I've used these over several years, and we're going to click on open. Okay, today we're looking at 20.4, so we'll click on next. All right. Now for the installation information, I am going to go super basic, and I'm going to just do full name is Ubuntu, the username is Ubuntu, and guess what? Password is also Ubuntu. So we'll move forward with that, and we'll click on next. Now I'm going to be working through this as a clustered setup here. So my nodes, if you will, as I set up more computers or more virtual machines, I'm going to want to label them. So for this one, I'm going to call it master. Okay, you can call it whatever you like. It doesn't make much of a difference, but you want to make it something that is meaningful. For the location, I'm just going to keep it here at the default location, but you're very welcome to go put these wherever you choose. I would recommend keeping it on a faster drive, so not a remote drive. However, it again won't make any difference where you actually place this. So let's click on next. Now, if you recall, back over here, it wanted, Ubuntu requires at least 25 gigs of free space. Well, 25 gigs is good, but more is going to be better in this case. It automatically gives us 20 gigs, so we're going to say, I think I want 40 gigabytes at this point. Now, it says here that splitting the disks makes it easier to move the virtual machine to another computer, but may reduce performance for large disks. Well, I tend to like going with the single. It really doesn't make much of a difference at this point, but again, for performance sake, you may want to just keep it as a single file. So let's click on next. So here's our hardware customization area, okay? So from this area, we can click on Customize Hardware. Now, our memory If you recall back over here, it says it requires 4 gigabytes of system memory. Well, it automatically defaults to 2 gigabytes. And notice that it has this little extra on the end. So 1 gigabyte is 1024, 2 is 2048, etc. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bump this up to 4, which means that will be 4096. So going with that, what it also says here is it gives you some system recommendations. It also says that I shouldn't go more than 6.2 gigabytes. The recommended, and this is just recommended based on my system, recommended is 2 gigabytes, okay? And the minimum recommendation is 1 gigabyte. So what we know about Ubuntu is it requires 4, so we put it to 4. If your system can't handle that, you can either add more RAM. That's something that you can always do to laptops. That's a good idea to do, in fact, if you're able to do that with your system. So think about that. Processors. It's asking for 2 processors. In fact, this is a dual core processor or better. I haven't really had much problems with running Ubuntu with 2 processors and 1 core processor. It hasn't been much of a problem, so I'm usually going to keep this at the default. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the adapter to bridged. This will allow us to have a physical network. Okay, it means that it'll assign it a physical IP address, which means that it will be findable on our network. So if we want to do SSH processes, we'll want to make sure that we have it set up so that you can access other SSH enabled systems. So let's move forward, and we'll click on close. And we're going to click finish. Now this process can take a little bit of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast track us for a little bit here until we get to something interesting where it actually asks us for. Okay, so now we're up and running on Ubuntu. The installation is finished processing. It probably took about 15 minutes on this system here. Your system may be a little faster or slower, so be patient. It will get to this point. So let's log into the virtual machine now. You just click on the area there that said Ubuntu, and remember our password was simply Ubuntu. So we go like that, and we'll enter into here. Okay. Now, once we get into the Ubuntu system, it's pretty straightforward from there. We do have a few things to upgrade, and that's going to be really important as we move forward in our setup process. Now, don't worry about any of this stuff here. This is all, again, we're building a test system. We're just demonstrating the environment, but you can set up your online accounts here if you want. I won't recommend it yet, but you can certainly go through that method if this is how you're setting this whole thing up to be something that you use regularly. There's lots of components to set up. We're just going to skip next and use the defaults on all of this. I'm not going to get too deep into any of this software installation, so there we go. All right, now one of the processes that's very important in Linux systems, and especially for the needs that I'm going to be using this for, is I'm going to be using this for a lot more worker processes and things like that. So something I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the terminal, and I'm going to do something called update packages. So you can go in here. I just click down here and I just go up here and I type terminal. Okay. Now, once I'm into terminal, you'll see it comes up like this. Something I really like to do is this. Let's just add this to the favorites so that's always there. Okay. If it's here and you need terminal, it's good to access. There's also a shortcut key as well. So if I do this and I just click on the desktop and I do Control-Alt-T, That will bring up a terminal window as well. Very straightforward. Now, you'll notice this as well. There's some software updates to do. You can go ahead and do them, but it will take some time. So don't do them right now. Wait until another time. I'm just going to click on Remind Me Later, but you can certainly do that. The reason you don't want to do that yet is because some of the processes that we're going to do over the next couple minutes will be interrupted by the software updater. So you want to think about this. Um, the other thing that you can also do is look at the software and update settings. You can tell it never update anything and let me do it manually. It's all up to you. But as I mentioned, it's this section right here, download install automatically. And what's going to happen is that while you're running some of these processes that we're going to do, it will it'll interrupt it saying that something is locked, and that's what we don't want to work on right now. We want to just work nice and fluidly through this. So let's stop that process, and we'll do a remind me later. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to update our packages. So we do sudo apt-get update. Okay, now what this is going to do is it's going to update our packages, and what that means is it's pulling down any kind of changes that have been made since this release of Ubuntu. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to ask me for my password. I click on enter, and your system may have a lot, may have only a few, but the key is that you will still have some over the next couple of minutes. So I don't have a lot to do here, so that's a really great thing. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm also going to run an upgrade. Now, this is where sometimes you might get a problem. And so I'm going to do this. And for this right now, we didn't get any problems, and that's because we didn't ask the automatic upgrades to go. So we're going to click on yes. Now there's fast ways to do that as well. This process takes a little bit of time, so be patient. It could take up to 5 minutes to do. Okay, so that process took about 5 minutes or so to download. There was a lot of stuff that had to be upgraded. Now, there's one other thing in going with what we did before I ran this process, which was I stopped the unattended updates or automatic updates. Something to think about here is this little command here, and I'm going to just copy it from one of my web pages, and we're going to run it just for a second. So what this does is it brings up a configuration for unattended upgrades. Now, the reason I'm asking you to do this is because, as I said before, it sometimes will interrupt some of the flow of our activities. So I am going to turn that off, and I'm going to set this to no, and then I'm going to press enter. Okay, what that's going to do is it'll turn off all of the automatic upgrades. Now, in a real world, you'd probably want all these updates to be going through. So if you're planning this for a real world system, don't turn off those upgrades. But for the purposes that I'm doing with this system, which is for testing, I don't want all these things getting in the way. So if we've done all of that process, we've pretty much come across everything. Now, just so I'm here, this is the error that you would get if you had any kind of problems with running the unattended upgrades. That's what happens, and you'll get an error that looks like this. It's a locked error, and if you go back through here and just run this process one more time, you can go ahead and do that. You can easily go to this website here. I'll try to put it in the show notes, but you can go here and check it out. So that is the final process for getting Ubuntu up and running and ready as a virtual machine. I am going to do one final process here, and I'm just going to do a reboot just so that we have a clean update of everything. that is how we do it. We type sudo reboot, and it goes through all the reboot process quickly. Okay, so let's log back in again. Type Ubuntu, and should be in there in just a second. And by the way, if you want things to go faster, you can add more processors anytime, and that'll fix that speed issue. One thing we should check is just to make sure that we have an internet connection. I'm pretty sure we do, but it's always good to just double check. Just make Firefox my default. Let's go over to YouTube or something like that. Double check that we actually have it, huh? Okay, so far so good. Looks like we've got Google. And it looks like we've got YouTube as well. Fantastic. Okay. All right, guys. Well, that is it for this session. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I always like your comments, so please leave a message in the comments below. And if you'd like to see any more future videos, please let me know. Bye-bye.